Hi! I'm kind of nervous on this one because it's exciting times. First of all, we just crossed 450,000 subscribers, which is amazing. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that sheer number. So thank you everyone who's watching, subscribing, supporting the channel. I gotta admit, I never planned this channel out to be this big and to be this thing. Second of all, you've probably noticed that there is a new name right under this video, and we're also getting a new logo. This channel is getting rebranded. I don't know if rebranding is fair, because really it is just branding. There's never been any branding. You know, I've had the situation in Chicago where I was asked, because I was running around with a camera, like, hey, are you a YouTuber? What's your channel name? And I was like, well, I'm gonna have to spell that out for you. And this has been like 3 years in the making now. This channel is now called Made with Layers. And here is why. So when I started this channel, really the entire reason for making a YouTube presence, creating something in the first place, was I saw the need for information. I was part of the Google Plus group back then, where people were just asking questions, and I saw the same stuff come up over and over again. And it was like, okay, the most efficient way to help everyone is to just spend a day or two on creating a video, make it compact, make it understandable. And that was the start of this YouTube channel. From there, it grew. You know, the content just basically got a mind on its own. Like I saw, hey, this thing's interesting, I'm gonna make a video about that, I'm gonna make a video about this. The good thing is 3D printing has changed since then. So 3D printing is not this, hey, I'm gonna need help with this one configuration option in Marlin anymore. Thankfully, I mean, that's been fun and all, but I'm really happy that we're now at a place where you can just buy a machine and it's gonna be good. And that is amazing. I love that this is the new reality, that, you know, printers out of the box simply are a tool that you can use. And the other thing, of course, is if you do need that in-depth information, there are now so many channels and blogs who frankly often do a better job than me at explaining those in-depth topics. And looking at some of the videos in the last couple of years, there are definitely some in there that I felt like I had to do, and not because I wanted to do them. And you can kind of tell in the performance, those didn't do so well. And on the other hand, the videos that did really well were just often stuff that I just was enthusiastic about, that I cared about and I wanted to learn more about. And you guys seem to enjoy that as well. So I'm gonna try to do more of that. Which brings us to the big elephant in the room. Of course, the channel will be named Made with Layers. I'm taking my name out of this. Honestly, Made with Layers is just so much easier to tell someone, hey, that's what my channel is, versus Thomas Sanladerer. Hey, how do you, what? So this channel has had some graphical overhauls, some graphical changes from the weird Western start, which was just Premiere Pro, just messing around, not knowing what I was doing, then the white and blue, and then I got into the diamond pattern. That was good. And that I'm still keeping around. And you've already seen some of the graphics that I will be using from now on forward. Overall, I think with the new design, I'm staying recognizable. I might still make some tweaks to it, I don't know. But what I wanted to do first, and sort of as a first project that honestly really doesn't, there's no 3D printing in this. I wanted to make a physical logo, a physical neon light logo, which is on the wall right there. And I'm gonna show you how I made it. There are two elements to making this neon style sign. The first one is, what do you use to make it glow? Now, of course, I could get a neon sign made, but I want to do it myself. So the option that I have is using this LED neon strip, and it is basically a 12-volt LED strip inside of a light guide. And that makes it really easy to use. It doesn't need any special power supplies, it just runs off of 12 volts. And to give it shape, all you need to do is to route a channel of the correct size. This is a 5mm strip, and then to push it into that channel, and it's going to give you that effect of neon. Now, as you can see, it only really gives you a light output towards the front, towards the viewer, and not really onto your backsplash to give it that glow. To fix that, we're going to make a special backsplash. So, of course, this is going to get routed out with the text, and then it's going to get that flat nightshade blue backsplash. But I'll also be airbrushing that glow back onto the sign to make it look like it's actually glowing more than it is. Now, to cut out the text and the framing, there's one obvious tool for this. and that is the Shaper Origin. I've used this thing before. It is basically a handheld CNC, that's what they're calling it. There's a router in here, there's a screen, a camera system, and basically you load your designs into this and it will guide you along your track and auto-correct for any small mistakes you made. Let me show you how it works. The Shaper uses this tracker tape to orient itself on your workpiece. It's got a camera in the back that picks up those patterns and also how your workpiece looks. We've now got a scan of our workspace and you can see that we've got a virtual representation of what our workpiece looks like. You can see that's where the tool head is, that's the crosshair, and that lines up with the spot down here. I could start drawing onto this virtual workspace and it would start routing that out, but because we want to import a design that we've done before, I'm actually going to create a grid first, and it's going to use the bit to probe the edge of our workpiece so that we know that our grid is actually perpendicular to the edges of our workpiece. So now we've got a perfectly spaced grid with the origin down at the lower right corner, which, I mean, isn't X, Y, 0, but it works for this case. Next, I'm gonna import my vector. I'm gonna scale it to the correct size, rotate it. Anchor is gonna be our bottom right corner so that we can align it with the bottom edge. And now I can just move this down to the edge of our workpiece and plonk it down. And there we go. There is the logo placed on our workpiece. At this point, we're basically ready to cut. I can just move over to one of our toolpaths. I can tell it, okay, I want to cut this one on the line and not just as a guideline. And there you go, there's our cut preview, and we can start plunging into the material and making these cuts. I'm excited. The shield goes on, hearing protection goes on, vacuum is on auto mode, and yeah, let's go. And there we go, that is good. I'll sand off the surface once we're done anyways. We did cut through the Shaper tape, it is intended for that. These little dominoes, this is what the camera inside the Shaper Origin sees to keep its position. But since we do have quite a few more than we need, we can cut through a couple and the machine's still gonna know where it is. So that's all the tracks for the LED neon cutout, and it does fit in pretty well. It is rather loose, which is intentional because it gives us some wiggle room to stretch and pull this LED neon tape, so that little differences in length to how long this track is and how closely we can cut this to that length, we can make up by just expanding, for example, the radius on the A and making that a bit smaller or larger. There are still a couple of spots where I'm not going to be able to make it work with the 3 centimeter roughly cutting pitch that I can do with these, so I'm going to have to figure something out there. Now, these letters were great, but the long straight sections were a bit tricky to cut because we're not just cutting MDF, we are cutting real beech hardwood, and depending on how the wood fibers are oriented, and because this is not a smooth MDF material, the feel of how you drag the Shaper Origin along can vary quite a bit. So these did have a couple bumps left and right, so I just took a second pass and routed through it again with less force because it was already routed out. So this lays in pretty nicely now, and because this side is just going to be in the background, this is going to be absolutely perfect. Plus, I can wiggle this around and adjust it to look perfectly straight. So what's left to do now is to cut this to length. Now I could draw a line in the Shaper and kind of score it and then use a circular saw, or I could just measure it, and I think that is the much smarter way to go about it. That is a clean cut, just takes forever with that little saw. Now, as long as the Shaper tape is still on our workpiece here, we could still, cut more stuff into it. We could add to this workspace, as it's called, but I think this is as good as it's gonna get. So next up, I'm gonna have to sand off the coating, the polyurethane that's on here, so that we can apply our own paint job to this. And for that, Shaper tape needs to come off and the belt sander needs to come out. Yeah. 40 grit. $80 grit. Always wear hearing protection, you only have one pair of ears. on 20 grit, 180 grit. Okay, that is sufficiently smooth. By the way, if you don't have a decent shop vac with an auto mode and pass-through, oh, get one of these. These are so worth it and not that expensive actually. Next up, I'll add a chamfer to the top with a traditional router and a chamfering follower bit. Yep, that looks about right. Yeah, nobody likes sanding. Let's get to painting. So I'll be doing 2 layers of paint on here. The first one's going to be with a cheap supermarket grade 2-in-1 primer paint combo. Then I'm going to give it a quick sand, and then we can add the final finish with the color that I got mixed up for this side. That's actually a pretty nice color too. Shame that I'm going to have to cover it up again. The color that I got mixed at the home center, which is RAL 5022 Night Blue, is maybe just a tad bit too light. Especially once I add the airbrushing to it, I would like this to be a bit darker. Thankfully, I still do have the graphite from the resin experiment, so I'm going to try and mix up a custom shade of this. I'm going to write down exactly how much I add in, so if I ever have to, I can reproduce it. Okay, wow, that doesn't seem to be doing anything. If anything, I think it's making it a bit brighter, a bit more metallic, a bit more glossy. I don't think I'm going to be adding any more into this, and I'm just going to give it a coat with this. And here we are, 2 coats later, and we're done. The color is actually pretty interesting because I don't know if it's just while it's still wet, but if you look at this, it almost has a metallic sheen to it. I think that is the graphite, but once this dries, it's going to be pretty nice and even. But yeah, look at this, the texture is really smooth, really even. I think this came out nicer than I expected. That was the easy part of getting the base coat down, and now it's time to move on to getting the glow basically airbrushed on. Now, I don't have an airbrush. Instead, I'm going to use the same sprayer as I've used for the base coat, and you can pretty finely adjust these. You have a control of how wide your spray is going to be, whether it's just going to be a spot or that wide track. These are basically a single action airbrush. So first you get air and then you get the nozzle that opens up, and you can limit how far you can open up that nozzle back here with that limiter. I'm going to set that to minimum. I'm going to set this to a very pointy, round track, and we're just gonna hope for the best. For airbrushing on that glow, again, I'll be using a water-based paint, this time colored in this light blue petrol. I'll be mixing in some white, I'll be thinning it down with some water, and then that should be, you know, pretty much what we need to get this, but a bit more saturated in the glowy areas. Okay, almost had a bit of a rough start there. It looked like, you know, on the first edge that I started on, I was getting like really blotchy output from the spray gun. But yeah, many passes later, I think this turned out pretty much exactly as I'd hoped for. This is going to look amazing with the LED strip in there. With the painting done, what's left to do is to add the actual LED neon. And yeah, I would say this was going well so far, too well. But yeah, this is actually the part that is going to be a bit tricky and fiddly and tedious maybe. I just saw Norm from Tested do a similar project at a bit smaller scale, a few simpler signs with the exact same stuff, and he was running into many of the same problems, like how do you solder to the ends, the fact that you can only cut it every 3 centimeters. And yeah, I think I've got some pretty good solutions for that. So first of all, for doing these outside 90-degree corners, I cut away just a bit of the LED neon, and now I can fold it into a sharp 90-degree corner. That I think is going to work pretty well. And some of these letters are actually a pretty weird length where I can't quite cut a full extra segment in there, so I'd have to cut it really short and that would leave a gap. So I'm gonna have to figure out something there as well. I'm thinking about replacing some of the LEDs in each segment. It's 3 LEDs per 3 centimeter segment with a resistor and shortening it that way. But let's just get the easy stuff done and we can figure that out once we have to cross that bridge. Alright, so I'm almost done with the inlay with the lettering on the inside here, and this has been quite the finicky job, mostly because this LED strip you can only cut at set intervals, and those intervals, as you can see, are spaced out to roughly, I think, 3 centimeters, a bit over an inch or something like that. So if you have a look at the S right here, that interval is just, shy of filling this up. There is a visible gap, which I don't think is going to matter much, but still, it is a bit short, whereas on the R, we're actually jamming it so tight that I was afraid of ripping the wires off or the cables off at the end that are soldered on. The E was perfect. The E worked out perfectly. Let me show you. There we go. That looks super crisp. But with the T, there was actually no way of having the center line, then this little perfectly 3 centimeter long side piece and this piece somehow connected and being able to cut it from these 3 centimeter long bits. So what I ended up doing with the piece for the T is actually pulling out the LED strip that is embedded in this PVC wrapper, cutting off one of the LEDs like this, and then this is a piece that I can use by itself with an additional resistor and hook it up to 12 volt, and we get a small tiny bit that is the perfect length for our T-bar. So this project had been sitting for quite a while now, because there was always stuff that was more important to finish than this. But really, there wasn't much left to do. I added the dot on the eye and glued up some of the gaps with hot glue to make it look a bit more seamless. And then all that was left to do was to add some French cleats to the wall and to the back of the sign and to hang it. Okay, I think this actually turned out really nicely. The glow works really well. You can't even tell that it's sprayed on airbrushed glow. It's not apparent, but it really does help with it looking organic like real neon. It's not perfect, nothing is ever going to be, but for what this is supposed to be, a prop background that's visible in some shots in the studio, this is perfect. And even to the naked eye, it looks really, really good. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. As far as the channel graphics and such go, of course, I'm going to slowly transition the channel to all the new names, all the new graphics. You've seen most of them already, but I'll keep tweaking them here and there. And if I ever feel like I can do better than what I've got now, I might revamp them. By the time you're watching this video, my X handle should already be @MadeWithLayers. The @Tom's3dp handle is going to be more off-topic personal stuff. @Layers@Fostodon.org is on Mastodon. And @MadeWithLayers is on Blue Sky, if that ever pans out to be something viable. Facebook, if you want to follow me there, I don't think I have the login to that, but I keep posting via an external app, so the stuff's going to be there, video updates and such. But yeah, I don't know, not a Facebook guy. And of course, here on YouTube, the @madewithlayers tag, that's been here for a while, and that's not going anywhere. I'm already excited for the next couple of videos because those are going to be projects that don't necessarily use 3D printing directly. They're not just 3D printed stuff. They're actually using them as a tool, and they're also using, you know, like here with the Shaper, using digital fabrication tools that maybe aren't 3D printers, which I'm really excited and keen on trying out and dipping further into. For this project, all the tools and materials that I used, including this LED neon, which I think is a really cool ace to have up your sleeve. And especially big thank you to everyone who's been supporting this journey, both on Patreon, YouTube memberships, and otherwise, that got me and this channel here to 450,000 subscribers, to finally having a channel name. But to everyone, thank you for watching, keep on making, and I'll see you in the next one.